Prescott Valley, and specific information to the other areas. So good news, we'll get reports and updates next month on the final report, and then you all can report on your each areas that are moving forward with that plan. Also, if you haven't seen the email, there is a new district administrator. Was formerly the district engineer, but they changed the title to district administrator. He starts on March the 21st. Anthony Rozich, I believe is his name. So that is all the announcements I have at this time, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Sir, real quick, Vinny, you know anything about this one?
About what?
Anthony?
I do. And I just, hold on just one second. I don't know him personally, but I was just going based off of the email.
Paul from Human, Mike.
He actually was promoted. Paul Patinay was actually promoted to the MPD director. So it's been a domino effect. So Dallas left. Greg Byers, who was the MPD director, went to Dallas's old position. Paul Patinay from Yuma went to Greg Byers' position. And now we have a new administrator. So I don't see the email. John Latier, are you on the line? Or Todd, either one of you, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was having issues getting unmuted. Yeah, Anthony is, his current position was the assistant state construction engineer. You know, he has a diverse background with ADOT and especially on the construction side. I mean, you know, I think you guys will be pleased with him as our district administrator.
Thank you, Todd. That's all I have.
Moving on, item 7, mobility management transit update.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. So Kimberly, our mobility manager, transit planner, is out on medical leave. The good and the bad news is she gave us permission to share, but she is pregnant, so that's great news. The negative news is she's having a tough time. So she is out on medical leave, so she would normally be here to provide a transit update. The good thing, though, with Lindsay's background in transit, she's helping out on an interim basis with the activities that Kimberly was responsible for. Again, meeting with the various mobility providers and the transit providers in the region. I want to say we met recently with the town of Prescott Valley with Pedro, on the transit manager. And Mayor, I believe you have a new name for your system. I don't know if it has been officially announced.
Yes, it is called Yavaline.
Yavaline. So the town of Prescott Valley is proud that there is a name. I understand there's branding. So all that to say there's progress moving forward. So anything else you wanted to add to that, Mayor?
No, they've been working real hard. The staff has. You wouldn't realize how much thought has to go into names, but we certainly did it. Norm and his team have been doing a great job. So, and I believe also Sedona will be kicking off their transit line next week. Is that safe to say? I believe. Yeah. So that's exciting for our area.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and acknowledge Tom from Yavapai Regional Transit in the room with us. We appreciate your participation and engagement. And he's been coming to various TAC meetings, and we're meeting with him. So with all that to say, we're trying to continue to move mobility and transit along as a conversation. So happy to take questions or comments.
All right, I think Kevin's still not on the line. I don't believe. Is that correct? We can just table.
Checking.
Yeah, let's see if he doesn't look like it. So we'll just skip item 8. We'll get back to Kevin, and we'll move on to item 9, review, discussion, and possible action to authorize chair to fully execute the professional service agreement with ACOM Technical Services, Inc. for the Sundog Connector design, concept report, and environmental overview. Mr. Gregos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So I do have a presentation they're going to be pulling up on the screen. So again, the item as discussed is in your packet. It's the professional services agreement with ACOM Technical Services for the Sundog Connector design, concept report, and environmental overview, DCR and PO. So if you can pull up that presentation, please. ready? So just a brief background on the Sundog Connector project and the DCR that we'll be talking about today. So I may have overlooked a couple of significant studies in the past, but I attempted to find the references over the last 25 years to the Sundog Connector project. I have it listed here up on the screen. So it started back in 1997 with the Prescott General Plan, and then on to the Prescott East Area Plan. I'm not going to read or list all of these plans, but each of these 16 plans, these significant general plans, CYMPO transportation plans, have referenced Sundog Connector for the last 25 years. I do want to acknowledge a couple specific ones. Number one, right after the Prescott General Plan in 1997, the Prescott East Area Plan moved forward, and that was in May of 1998. That plan was inspired by the 1997 City of Prescott General Plan. Three key points, and I listed them as bullet points, that both of the plans highlighted and moved forward in the Prescott East Area Plan was integration of transportation planning into land use planning. Number two, to plan regionally in terms of roads and water. Just a reminder, this is pre-CYMPO. CYMPO didn't come around until the 2000 census. We were officially established in 2003, but the focus on regional road planning was already a priority. Number three, good traffic management and transportation planning. This is the quote from the Prescott East Area Plan that covered, and if you're not familiar with it, it covered the area around the Sundog Connector, but the primary focus of the plan was the connector itself. This quote is from the plan. Timely construction of the proposed Sundog Connector is encouraged to help relieve future increases on Highway 69. So that was the quote 24 years ago. And then the third and the final point on this is increased transportation efficiency and safety by providing multimodal facilities that connect to greater circulation systems. In the DCR scope, we acknowledge this point by putting in the different modes of transportation, so obviously vehicles, but also pedestrian, bicycles, and trails. So that is a part of the planning and the review process. Let's fast forward from 1998 to 2013. The Sundog Connector Corridor Study was done to focus specifically on the corridor. So the previous study was the connector and the surrounding area. This one was to look at all the previous studies that referenced it before. We've talked about this quite a bit before, but what I would say is that study did close out by saying the next step to take is a design concept report and environmental overview, or DCR and EO. So again, here we are 9 years later, looking forward to taking that next step. So here's kind of the big picture. So looking at a high elevation level, maybe a 50,000 elevation level, we started with the Prescott General Plan. And then a few years later, we drilled down a little bit lower into the Prescott East Area Plan. And then we drilled down a few years after that into the Sundog Connector Corridor Study. And then it brings us to the next drilling down elevation-wise to the Sundog Connector Design Concept Report. After 18 months, then the next step, if you want to go even more specific, is to actually design the road. That would be the ground level part of this. So again, from the general plan all the way to the design has been the last 24 years on this project. Let's talk briefly about the land ownership for Sundog Connector. So this is only about 3.5 miles roughly, and there's a lot happening in this 3.5 miles. There is roughly about 1.75 miles of state trust land. There is 1 mile of City of Prescott outside of the state trust land. And then there's 3/4 of a mile in the town of Prescott Valley. I did add a little note in here about Yavapai County. Again, Yavapai County, unincorporated Yavapai County, does not have jurisdiction or does not have any part of ownership within the study area, but they do have the Diamond Valley unincorporated area just south of the study area. So again, just technically it's not within the study area, but it is neighboring or adjacent to it. I've visited with city staff to confirm that there is 2 development agreements, one from the city of Prescott and Yavapai Hills in 1998, one with the city of Prescott and Storm Ranch from 2007. Both of those agreements represent about 1.25 miles of Sundog connector to be constructed by the city of Prescott and or the developer. So that 1.25 miles would run from Prescott Lakes Parkway east. So for the bottom line, as we look to this in the future, that leaves about 2.25 miles or 2.25 miles from Yavapai Hills to State Route 69, if you look at what's outside of that development, those 2 development agreements. One other image here is the 2 ends of Sundog Connector have existed in our community either 10 or 20 years. In the town of Prescott Valley, Sundog and State Route 69 was completed January of 2000. And then in Prescott, at Prescott Lakes Parkway, in front of the new jail that's being built, was completed May of 2011. So those 2 bookends of the project have been in the community 10 to 20 years. Historic timeline for CYMPO over the last year, we gathered at the strategic planning retreat, August of 2021. The consensus was to focus on Sundog Connector in year 1. In September, a month later, we went ahead as staff brought forward the potential funding for the project for you to review in the Transportation Improvement Program. You approved the funding for the project November of 21 for the Sundog Connector DCR and EO. And then in December, the board was presented and approved the issuing and advertising for the request for qualifications or RFQ for the DCR and the EO, and then bring us to where we are today for your consideration of the professional service agreement, which includes the scope, cost, and timeline. I believe this is my final slide before I turn it over to introduce the proposed consultants. So transportation planning for safety, capacity, resilience, a reminder about CYMPO's vision is to promote and maintain a regional coordinated transportation system for the safe and efficient movement of people, goods, and services. So over the last year, safety has become a major part of this discussion. What is adequate emergency response, especially to the Yavapai Hills and surrounding areas? And it seems as though talking with the fire department, the ambulance, the adequacy is not currently there at the level of development and residents. And at this time, the city of Prescott, as I understand, has a preliminary plat for Yavapai Hills to deliver or to build further north, a little over 200 homes. And then same for Storm Ranch to have an additional 200 plus homes. So again, safety has become a major issue, which includes the resiliency of our transportation network. So that's the highlights over the last 24 years. With that said, it froze up on us, I think. Is there one more slide?
Yeah.
So with that said, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce you to the proposed consultant, AECOM, and the project manager is Matt Bondy. He's here with his wife, Kate Bondy, who's also on the team. AECOM is an organization that has served on many projects in the region, very familiar to our technical staff, our staff. So Matt, if you want to come up and go through a couple of your slides, please.
Sure.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gallegos, members of the board. My name is Matt Bondy. As Vinny mentioned there, I am the project manager for AECOM, who is the proposed consultant for this contract. Vinny has asked that we just go through a couple of slides here just to kind of give everyone some highlights of what our scope is looking like and some of the details from that to provide a little information for the board here. So overall, what we're looking at or what we proposed is an 18-month schedule, start to finish. The way that we have looked to structure our consultant management team, we've taken into account, we wanted to prioritize the public involvement aspect of the project and the overall analysis portion of the project. So we're looking kind of at a combined management team of myself as the project manager, Kate Bondi, who is with us here today for some of that stakeholder involvement aspects, and also Dylan Kennedy, who has some significant involvement up in the region as well for the planning and the overall just stakeholder involvement portion of the project. Our team is also made up of 2 sub-consultants and a traffic count vendor. So the 2 sub-consultants being Kimley Horton and Associates, who we have on our team for drainage and utility coordination, and Aerotech, who would be our topographic survey sub-consultant. Also with Aerotech, that the fundable of their Aerotech would help us meet our disadvantaged business enterprise goal, our DBE goal of that 1.73%. We do exceed that DBE goal. Just a few items to highlight here on just some of the study goals of the project, just to touch on a little bit here as we formulated our scope. So overall, what we'll be looking to do up front is we want to establish that purpose and need, and we want to do that with public input. So we want to see, establish what the purpose is needed, and then overall establish the benefit and impacts of the corridor implementation. So all that in mind, we want to do that with public involvement taken into account. So really defining what the purpose and need for the project is, and the overall benefit of what the project would be. We'd be looking at identifying configuration for potential regional significant route. We'd be looking at typical sections and proposed alternative alignments. We'd be analyzing different aspects of the typical sections as far as number of lanes, multimodal transit type opportunities. We could be looking at sidewalk, multi-use path, trail, all those different aspects of the project. That would be something we'd be looking at as we go through the development of the project, develop alternatives and evaluate all alternatives. One of the big components here, enhanced public involvement process and then informed decision making. So we want to make sure that we have the public involved through every step of the project, start to finish. And then as we're going through the project, we want to help inform the decision makers for overall to come up with, what the preferred alternative or what the actual need is for something within the corridor, if something is proposed to move forward. So the overall goal is we want to bring information to the table, public, everything involved with the analysis to the decision makers to really determine what the overall need for the corridor really is. Just another slide here on some of the study needs. We actually pulled this from our proposal. I'm not going to get too deep into it here, but some of the needs for the study, some of the needs for the potential needs for the area, congestion relief, emergency access or evacuation opportunities, assessing some of the project unknowns. So taking some of the higher level planning or some of the assumptions made in some of the previous studies and getting into more detail and being able to make more informed decisions to bring to the table. And then overall preparing for funding opportunities or looking into potential funding opportunities. Just wanted to touch some on the public engagement process, as this is one of the very key elements to this study. So looking at the scope we have prepared, we are looking at 2 public open houses. So those opportunities taking the study to the public, informing them of what the study is, giving opportunity for the public to provide comment and input on as the project moves forward. There will be 3D visualizations provided at the open house where we could show a proposed preferred alternative. We could do a visual flyby so the public can actually see visually what the corridor might look like and be able to hopefully make a more informed decision based on that visual input there. We would have also 2 additional stakeholder workshops. So these workshops would be made up of members of the TAC and also select members of other public type stakeholders. we would do these prior to any of the open houses, so we can be building or bringing in input before we take things out to the public throughout the whole stage of the study, so we can be making informed decisions and preparing preparing the study in alternatives according to the stakeholders' wants and needs. We'll have regular updates to project websites and social media blasts. We'll be CYMPO will have a website for the study up. We'll be providing input on that. We'll be making sure that the public is informed on what the status of the project is. It'll provide opportunities to provide comments and have contact information on there for anyone who wants to reach out and has any questions on what the study is, what the progress is, or any input needed from it. In addition, we also have 5 miscellaneous outreach events or meetings where we could, as needed throughout the life of the project, if we needed to take a presentation to an HOA or take something to a board meeting or something like that, where we present, we could talk about whatever stage of the project that we're at, and essentially bring more input or put more information out there as we go through the life of the project there. I think we have 1 slide left. And then just overall study scope, we've highlighted some of the key tasks or elements of some of the things that we'll be doing as we go through the project. I'm just going to briefly touch on these, but our scope would involve monthly progress meetings. We will be collecting topographic surveys, or our sub-aerotech will be out there collecting the surveys so we could formulate a little more detailed alternatives than some of the previous studies before. We'll be upfront establishing the purpose and need for the project. We'll develop conceptual alternatives. We'll look at 4 to 5 different alternatives for the corridor, alignment, and typical section that we would then neck down to some of the more preferred alternatives that the TAC and the project stakeholders want to move forward for further evaluation. So that we'd be looking at the 2 build alternatives. We provide alternative evaluation with that. We'd be evaluating the build alternatives along with the no build alternative as well. We'd be doing drainage analysis and drainage report. We'd be looking at traffic analysis, including access management. We'll be looking at utility needs, right-of-way needs, preparing cost estimates for the alternatives and preferred. We would take it to 15% plans on the selection of a preferred alternative, and then overall the end product or end deliverable of the design concept report and the overall environmental overview. That takes us through the end of our slides there.
And Mr. Chair, I have 1 more slide. Matt, if you want to stay there,
Yep.
we'll have questions here in a moment. But my final slide is, so for this past year, CYMPO staff, and me in particular, have been receiving comments, questions about the project as it's been reported. Some of those, and obviously there's dozens of more, but I summed them up by saying, do we really need the road? What about the sound, the lights, the traffic, the location, wildlife, cost? How much of this is development driven? How much will this promote more development? Where does the developer fall in this? Construction, the comment is construction's already decided. And then what about State Route 69? I had a conversation with a gentleman from Yavapai Hills yesterday for about an hour, and many of these were his questions. And I would say over the last year, my response has been relatively about the same, that this planning process will allow us to look at specifically each and every one of those questions and those concerns. Right now, the only information we have to work off of is the 2013 study. So this 18-month study, this DCR EO, will allow us to look at each of these specific things. As Matt just mentioned, one of the alternatives will be a no-build option after that 18 months. So if the decision makers in the community choose to not move forward, what does that no-build option look like? What does it look like to the rest of the transportation network around it? Again, as Matt outlined, the things that you'll be receiving is the information as it relates to this. And I've said this many times before. Again, there are no monies at this time identified for the design and the construction of this road. So I know many of the citizens and residents are concerned that decisions have already been made beyond the 18 months. CYMPO as a planning organization is looking to continue the planning efforts over the last 25 years that have been talked about, and to basically give you the information to make an informed decision. So with that said, Mr. Chair, I'm available for questions and comments. The tentative project manager of AE Combat Bondi is available and happy to address any questions or comments.
I'd just like to start off, Vinny, with this is a misconception, I think, and with people in regards to that this was something that was drummed up within the past 12 months, 18 months, that we thought, hey, let's put the Sundog connector, let's build a road. And I'm glad you showed the PowerPoint in regards to, it basically showed a progression of steps from basically literally before CYMPO on how this has been in the works, and it's been discussed for years. And I think we are just going in that progression of steps to that point where now we are at a position where we have to find out, we have to know what we don't know. And I think the gentleman at the podium is that, I mean, that's his main job. Am I correct on that? When it comes to answering questions, figuring out if something will work or not work, if this is a go or a no-go.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think when you bring up transparency and public involvement, because a lot of the people out there right now, they don't understand what we have. They just hear a road and they just automatically put up a defense. And your job is to hopefully answer those questions and make sure everyone at least can make an informed decision, and that the individuals up here can also make that informed decision when the time comes. So I appreciate that. Mr. Hughes, do you have anything?
I do. This has been in the works. It's not a surprise to anybody. I travel that road most every day, and anything that we can do to get a study together to educate people on how we can relieve the stress on 69 should be a godsend. That's my opinion. I do not represent either one of the towns there, but the surrounding towns, my citizens travel that road every day too. And they've traveled it before it was what it is today. So anytime we can get a study together to try to figure out what is going on around our area to relieve traffic and stress off of our main corridors, it's a plus. If this was in the middle of my town, I would be all for it too, just because we want to relieve the stress and cut the traffic back. But the information is what's the most important. People we talk to every day talk about the Sundog connector, and it's all this assumption that it's just going to be a road. They don't understand that there's all these steps to get to that point. And I think when you have a study with a 9-year gap now between the last study, this shouldn't be discussed today. It should have been discussed 5 years ago. But with all the other things that are going on in the community, we're back to it now, and we're at the last step up on the ledge to make this decision. Today, it's a pretty simple one. We've already went through all the process to get to the point today. I think the study should go on through.
Thanks, Cal. I appreciate the scope and the capabilities of AECOM's presentation. And I agree with Denny that list of concerns, it's something I hear pretty frequently. And I agree, there's a lot of people that think this is just something that was put together in the last year or two to have some underlying support for more development at the detriment of the people that live in Yavapai Hills, on the ranch, Kind Valley, or even some of those other areas. So I think it's really important that those concerns be carefully considered and addressed. I'm sure you're going to hear from a lot of people that share those concerns. And I think being able to have these stakeholder meetings and the community meetings to be able to make sure people understand that this is something that's been of concern for decades, quite frankly. And even though people say, I've heard from residents who are concerned that once the road goes in, then all this additional residential development, occurred shortly thereafter. And then it becomes a pass-through Yavapai Hills to be able to get to Costco and all of some of the other ones. That certainly has to be considered. But people have to realize that we're continuing to develop that corridor as it is. The Gateway Mall has a number of very substantial development plans that are moving rapidly forward. We have more development on 69 corridor near Frontier Village. We've got a urgent care that's being designed by Dignity Health. There's another small acute care hospital that's being planned near there too. And I know the tribe has some plans for even additional resort development within that corridor. So clearly the congestion we're dealing with now is only going to be increasing. So being able to have an alternate, potentially alternate transportation artery, I think needs to be well considered. I've lived in a number of communities where long-term plans have included easements and right-of-way acquisition for future traffic problems. And then you end up with local activists that convince the elected body to abandon those. And years later, people are saying, why the heck wasn't that done? Because here now we're dealing with just overwhelming traffic congestion concerns. And they'll point the finger way back at these guys should have done it when they had a chance. So I think it's really important that all of those things on the list and concerns are well studied so that we have the ability to say, does this need to be done? Does it need to be done now? What are the consequences? What are the costs? What are the costs both in quality of life to nearby residents, but the actual cost to the taxpayers as well. So I think it's appropriate that we proceed with this analysis so that all those questions can be fully considered and answered for concerned residents and businesses, and the impact on traffic both in Prescott Valley and quite frankly in the county too. When you realize that even though the county is not directly involved here, all that increased value of that property, the property taxes will be very beneficial to the county itself, much more so than some of our communities that will be affected directly. So that's.
Thank you, sir.
There.
It was closer to a quarter. Yeah. Anybody else?
With Chino Valley, of course, we're the least affected by any of this. Talks with the mayor and the town engineer. We are in favor of the study going ahead as long as there will be a no-build process in it. So if we go through the study, which has been going on for 24, 25 years, complete that study and then go from there with what's recommended. And I applaud the public involvement in it all.
Craig, you want to say something?
No, the county is ready to support either the towns or both the towns together in this venture because it affects them way more than it does the county in any way. One of the concerns is though, is that I think we're going to spend some money and we're going to find out that 69 is where we need to go 6 lanes, especially with the new revelation that's taking place at CYMPO. So a lot of transportation needs that we need for heavy vehicles and things like that occurs. So that's argued back and forth. And just want to let everybody know what fund they're into, getting into when they go to the meetings down there. I was in the one in 2013, so it'll be a challenge.
With that being said, can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, you also have Gary.
Mr. Knight, I'm sorry. Can you hear us, Gary? Does it show that he's on?
It's,
Here-
it's,
There you go.
it's-
You're breaking up. I think you're not, everybody's not speaking directly into the mic. They're probably moving away from it while they're speaking. So part of what they say is clear, and then it tapers off as they move away from the mic. You need to really speak directly into the mic and stay there.
All right, Gary, can you give us your thoughts on this item?
Well, I think this it's been going on for so long that it really needs to continue to move forward and get the answers that you're looking for. With the development that has occurred, you really need to have emergency vehicle access, and it doesn't seem like that exists without the Sundog corridor adequately anyway. So it does look like that it's probably that it's needed. So as long as this has been going on since 1997, I have to say that there must have been a good reason for and a need for the Sundog corridor, or it wouldn't have sustained life since 1997. And it would be a shame to go all this way and then not have all the answers before you make any final decisions. So I would think you need to move forward with it.
Thank you, sir. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to authorize the chair to fully execute the professional service agreement with AECom Technical Service Inc. for the Sundog Connector Design Concept Report and Environmental Overview.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Moving on, item 10, ADOT Northwest District Report. Todd.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, for the SR 69, SR 169 roundabout, we're working with our on-call process to get a design firm on board. The widening from Prescott Lakes Parkway to Heather Heights in the median project, we're trying to package that final design up and get it out this summer for advertisement. We have the legislative funded project from Truewood to Stone Ridge. We're working on the cost estimate for that project to finalize the scope and move into final design on that project. On SR 89 from 322.4 to 325 approximately. We've got a minor pavement preservation project that advertised. Down on 69 from Big Bug to Poland Junction, you have a minor surface treatment project down there on that section. Over on I-17, we've got the ITS broadband going in. Currently, they're in between mileposts 345 to 245 to 250 coming up the hill. And then Sunset Rest Area, the refurbishing of that just advertised last week. And then Vinny made the announcement for the DA. Is there any other questions for me?
Doesn't look like it, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, looks like we got Kevin, but is Kevin on? Let's just bump back up to item 8, Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, RTAC report. Mr. Adam.
Oh, sure, sorry. Kevin, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're having technical difficulties, but we can hear you. Can I do a lead-in before you get started?
Sure.
Will you pull up so as staff, we're working on a two-page infographic because we've been verbalizing the specific projects, and Kevin will go into the background. Again, I have this in a draft form. I'll email this out probably either tomorrow or this evening. But this illustrates the 4 projects that we have identified. I did send you an email with 3 of the projects, and then we were able at the 11th hour add a 4th project to the conversation. Again, the background before we look at this infographic was RTAC, Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, represents the 10 MPOs and COGs in Greater Arizona outside Phoenix and Tucson. We basically came together and had a discussion and wanted to pursue one-time transportation funding in light of the legislators going after a little over 300 million of one-time projects. We thought this year $50 million would be a decent ask. That project had a list of 36 projects on it. 32 of the 36 projects were local projects throughout Arizona. 4 of them were state highway related projects. We went through the transportation committee of the House, and that was approved to move on to the appropriations committee, at which point the appropriations chair would not hear the item with the local projects on it. Now, at that point, the MPOs and COGs in Arizona, to get to that point, took us about 10 months to get that list through our various staffs, our technical committees, through our executive boards, talking with our locals. With Kevin's leadership, we met with Senate and House leadership. We met with at least 20 plus leaders to start to get their support on this project. So when the appropriations chair really threw the curveball, we had a matter of days. So Kevin, again, with working with the MPO and COGs, has been scrambling to come up with a plan B. Clearly, there's been no way for us to duplicate a 10-month process. So again, we're talking a matter of days. So what has happened since then is we are at the direction of the appropriations chair, only focused on state highway related projects. Thankfully for CYMPO, 2 of the 3 projects we had were already state highway projects. So we were pretty in a decent position. So specifically, and then Kevin will give you more background, we had identified these, what I have up on the screen, State Route 89 and the 89A eastbound on-ramps near the airport going to Prescott Valley. So CYMPO is currently with actually AECOM's doing the study for us. We are currently wrapping up a study looking at this on-ramps. I've seen the tentative final draft of the study, and one of the alternatives shows to add a second on-ramp lane, and the cost is a little under $6 million. So what you had previously approved was we were going to be receiving about $4 million if this was successful, and we had identified about $2 million to go towards this on-ramp project. I was having conversations with ADOT essentially to partner with them, that we would put in $2 million towards the project. ADOT was looking for the additional funds. In light of this, we've increased our ask to fully fund the 89A project. The second project that we've identified, scroll down, Lindsay, please. The second project, again, this was on our original list. We had a little under $500,000 for the State Route 69, 169 interchange roundabout at Prescott Valley and Dewey Humboldt at the border. If you remember, ADOT has the minor district funds, a little over $3 million. The concern was that that's not going to be enough funding to cover this roundabout. So we had added $500,000 to it. Talking with ADOT, again, there's still need for additional funds. So we did increase the request from $500,000 to 1.5 million. You would scroll down to the third project, please. The third project, as Todd had given an update, was the State Route 69 widening and safety capacity project, which has achieved a 95% design, I believe, and that's another AECom project. So they're almost finished with the design of the project. The budget's a little under $13 million. ADOT has reported that all projects are coming in roughly 20% over bid. So again, a concern for this particular project, we've been sitting on this budget for several years with not taking into account the current economy and the cost of labor and materials. So it is very likely that this project will come in. There are some additional parts to it, such as a multi-use plant, lighting. In light of that, we went ahead and added this to the list for $3.5 million. I did email this previously to you, again, those three projects. And then as Kevin was putting the list together, there was also another recommended project that CYMPO had previously prioritized and had gone after raise grants or build grant funds a few years ago, if you'd scroll to that last project. This is also a priority in the regional transportation plan. And this is State Route 89 safety and capacity improvements. We added it for about $25 million. So it would essentially widen State Route 89 in the Chino Valley going north area. It would add a safety median, would add additional intersection safety improvements. So the very short version of a very big announcement is our request went from $4 million to $36 million. The entire package went from $50 million to a little over $250 million. With that said, those are the specifics for CYMPO. Now I'll turn it over to Kevin to give you additional information where we sit with it, what's happening, and I guess where we're going. So Kevin, thank you.
Thanks, Vinny. And just to follow up on that, so it has been a rather frantic process, but we wanted to continue to have a say and influence try to maximize the amount of surplus funding that does get directed to Greater Arizona infrastructure this year. So when we were told that no local projects would be allowed according to the House Appropriations Chair, we did work very proactively to come up with this alternative list of state projects. So we retained and expanded the existing state projects that were in our list. And then with a lot of help from Board Member Knight, we were able to work with the ADOT Planning Department and come up with those Greater Arizona priorities that just didn't make the cut for their most recent tentative 5-year construction program update. If had there been a little bit more money available to ADOT, these would more than likely be the first projects that would have been included. We then took a look at those at the projects as a whole and went back and talked to the COGS MPOs, some of the local jurisdictions to provide more regional balance to our list. So we got that finalized. And then the next step was I met with the Rural Caucus last week, which is all of the rural legislators meet once a week at the Capitol. And we asked if there were any projects not included in that list that any would like to see included to get back to me. And, pick your description, whether it's ironically or frustratingly. I did get 3 requests from legislators to add additional projects. And unfortunately, they were all local projects, which we had just gotten the direction to not include. So we're still trying to finesse and work through that. One of those came from Representative Burgess, where she's very interested in seeing improvements along Old Route 66 completed before the centennial celebration. And I'm back in Washington. It's been fairly hectic bouncing around between meetings, and I've been playing phone tag with Supervisor Brown and Craig. I'm sorry for not being able to talk to you directly. I was able to touch base with Roger about an hour and a half ago, and he explained that the section of 66 that Ms. Burgess was interested in is probably not viable. In fact, it's already funded. And he indicated that what we really should be targeting on 66 is about a 30+ mile repavement at about 23 million. So I will get back to Representative Burgess as well as Representative Dunn, who's our bill sponsor. And first off, we need to see if they're willing to overlook or provide exceptions to the appropriation chair's declaration that no local projects are going to be included. And I'm not going to rule out that possibility. I think there's a chance. I don't think she's going to allow a broad list of local projects, but she may provide some exceptions for one or two if it's in exchange for some yes votes on the budget. So I won't rule it out. I'll at least go back to Ms. Burgess and Mr. Dunn, get their feedback as far as whether or not they want to include that Route 66 project or part of it. And if so, we'll include that as well. But at this point, we're not going to be amending any existing bills. We're negotiating directly to see these projects included in the state budget. So that process is already underway, seems to have momentum. Now, going from local projects to state projects, the cost has escalated dramatically, which is, I think that's natural when you're dealing with highways as opposed to streets. So I also think there's a good possibility that even though we're advocating for the list in whole, there's a very good possibility that this could end up being sort of a menu of options. And those legislators who advocate the strongest and are the most insistent on projects from their district being included in the budget are the ones that are going to be the most likely included. And so I would encourage you to continue to work with President Fan as well as Representatives Nguyen and Burgess on supporting your projects. And ultimately, we'll see how successful we are. There's a tremendous amount of revenue that's going to be available this year. Right now, the legislature's budget staff is estimating they have about $3 billion, a $3 billion balance to work with. About 2.1 billion of that is one-time in nature and would be more appropriate to one-time spending. There is going to be a lot of demand for the use of that, but that is an all-time high level of revenue that they have to work with. So we're hopeful that a lot of it will be directed towards transportation, and all indications are is that is a priority of theirs. And so we'll continue to work to try to maximize as much of that surplus funding going to transportation as possible. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Do you have anything for Kevin? Kevin? Oh, Mr. Gallegos.
Sorry. Kevin and Mr. Chair, members of the board, I did have the opportunity to speak to Representative Nguyen last evening to give him a heads up about this. So we had previously talked on the original package. I gave him an update on this. So he's looking forward to a call from all of you to get more support, but he's aware of it. I'm going to provide him the infographic after we make a couple adjustments. So he's in the loop. And we did meet with President Fan on the original package, but I don't know that Kevin, I don't know that we've met with her since then.
We need to follow up. In fact, that's occurring. We are setting up a meeting with the Senate Appropriations Chair, because our bill was introduced in the House, that's really been where most of our focus has been. But yeah, we need to circle back to the senators, and President Fan has been very supportive, and I'm very confident that she'll continue to be so. But yeah, it is time to circle back with her.
All right, Kevin. Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Moving on, last item, item 11, State Transportation Board report. Gary, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
You're up.
There's only, of course, we've got the Transportation Board meeting Friday in Marana. Everything's been switched from, it was Tucson, everything's been switched to Marana, including the meeting in council chambers at Marana. It will be a hybrid meeting. It'll be virtual and in person, whichever way you want to be there. The only item on that agenda for Yavapai is an item for SR 69. It's a pavement preservation. It's Cordis Junction to Prescott Highway, SR 69. It's actually 100% Fed funding, and it came in about $500,000 under bid, or under estimate, as a matter of fact. Asphalt Paving and Supply, Inc. Got the bid. Hang on just a second, I can give you the milepost. It is a milepost 271.56 to milepost 279.1, and the work consists of pavement preservation and, of course, milling existing asphalt, replacing with new asphalt. So that one is up for board approval, and it's recommended to be awarded to Asphalt Paving and Supply, Inc. And that's the only project on this month's board agenda for Yavapai County. That concludes my report, unless somebody has a question.
Any questions for Gary?
Hey, Gary, what's the time frame for that to start?
You know, that's not,
Okay,
I can ask him when we vote on it and
Okay.
actually award it, then I can, it does say, it doesn't give me a start and a completion date, but it does say the, once we award it, 100 working days.
okay, thank you.
Anything else? Gary, thank you.
You bet.
With that being said, we're on to item 12, adjournment.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.